Of course, the Haganah was not the only fighting force in the war. Finally, according to international law, the land separated from the Ottoman Empire was under the guidance and control of Britain. They had to fulfill their main duty, namely establishing law and order in the land under their guardianship. Well, it is obvious that the Britons were in harmony with us. In this way, following this wave of Jewish immigration and Arab opposition, finally in 1935, Sheikh Izz-ad-Din al-Ghassam and his fighters were killed by the British forces. However, I'm afraid that the spirit of that uncontrollable Palestinian will reincarnate in the next generations, and repeating his name will always frighten us. What's more, the British successfully attacked their headquarters with armored equipment and helicopters. It's obvious that it would have been better to credit the Haganah members for the honor, but in the end, it wouldn't make much difference. The important thing was that the road to improve the situation should have been paved. The victory of Britain and the Jews it supported against Izz-ad-Din al-Ghassam facilitated migration. So, a few years later, 250,000 more Jews entered the promised lands of Herzl. Imagine that you're moving towards your lover on the road. The familiar signs of her home make you excited, don't they? People welcomed immigration to Palestine, the land of peace and oats and olives. For me, these are the coveted signs. Now the Jewish population comprised 30% of the total population. The final victory seemed to be closer day by day. As if Britain and the Jewish immigrants were the complements of Prophet Moses' promise. The promised land was rising like the sun on the horizon. We had given up everything to reach the sunrise. It is clear that the Palestinians had not remained idle during these years. Britain had launched an organization called the Palestine Police in 1920 to maintain domestic order. The Arab fighters knew that the organization would serve with the common interests of us, Jews and Britain. The Palestinians wanted to stand against irrational words. Of course, nothing but violence was expected from creatures like them. They planned the biggest revolution, or as they called it, Intifada, until that time. It was really massive, and it is obvious that they were very strong. 6 months of nationwide strike and widespread resistance against the Haganah and other Jewish military groups had troubled Britain as well. They formed the Peel Commission in 1936. The commission tried to propose a plan to establish peace. This is the gist of their plan: dividing Palestine into 2 Arab and Jewish countries. But again, the Arabs did not agree. The Jews wanted a country proportionate to the percentage of their population. But the Palestinians said only about 6% of the land belonged to the Jews. They are narrow-minded. miserly and selfish people, like the Russians who drove us away, like the Poles, Germans, or the Venetians, even the British, who are our enemies at least in their hearts, like all non-Jewish people in the world. They have been created like beasts. Their most respectful name is Gentile. The Talmud is right about it. They did not agree to Britain's plan, not because Al-Quds was supposed to remain under the British control, but because of the percentage of land ownership. In that year, we were on the brink of victory, but we did not achieve it. The Palestinian resistance was about to turn the tables on us. In that year, Walter Rothschild, the Jewish member of the British Parliament, managed to persuade Arthur James Balfour, the British Foreign Minister, to declare the British Kingdom's support for the formation of the Jewish state. Balfour announced his agreement in a letter. In a short letter he wrote, November the 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I am proud to state to you, on behalf of His Majesty the King of Great Britain, that your request was sent to the Cabinet of the British government and was accepted. His Majesty agreed to the establishment of a national home for the Jews in Palestine, and he is doing his best to make this happen. It is very obvious that the civil and religious rights of the non-Jewish and native inhabitants of Palestine should not be violated, nor should the legal and political needs of the countries in that region be violated. I would be grateful if you present this statement to the Zionist Association. The last part of the letter was not very important for us and the respected Jewish agency. The important part was the principle of support. But now, in 1939, the pressure of the Palestinians had become overwhelming. The cowardly Britons, they published a famous statement known as the White Book. It banned Jewish immigration to Palestine, the land of milk and honey, for the next 5 years. It was a strange law, something contrary to all the years of immigration and hardship. Did we face all those hardships to get here? How could we abide by such a law? Even if your biggest supporter had introduced the law, we had to defend our achievements after several years of displacement and homelessness. We all stood together, side by side, against going back. The Haganah, Ashtern, and other Jewish military groups continued the war not only with the Palestinians, but with the British. For example, Evelyn Barker was like Arabs. He was the commander-in-chief of the British Armed Forces, but he didn't seem to have any respect for the Jews. Maybe if we were in the Holy Land before the occupation of Palestine, nothing could be done, but now the least they could do was to attack his house with hand grenades. After that, when the British did not retreat and did not realize their mistake, we had to bomb their headquarters. The King David Hotel was demolished so the British would realize that they should stay away from things like the White Book. Now, the British should realize that their presence was no longer helpful. Now they had to leave Israel much faster than they entered Palestine. From 1941 to 1947, war and bloodshed took the developments to an irreversible stage. We had to make the international community understand that the world will never return to the past years. There was a time when the Jews had to stabilize the land they had captured, where we could no longer hope for full and complete support from the British. If the Jews had taken a step back, everything they had achieved would go down the drain. I told myself that in that unpleasant and dangerous situation, the daughter of the Mabovich family should play a more important role. In 1944, my dad passed away in exile and without having a homeland, and I wanted to do something astounding to keep his memory alive. My dear carpenter dad, my first memory from him goes back to the time when we were in Kiev and he boarded up the door of the house out of fear for the rumor that the Jews were being massacred. Death in the US finally found the exact location of Moshe the carpenter. On the eve of victory in 1947, I had to go to Jordan on a mission assigned by David Ben-Gurion to infiltrate the heart of the Jordanian government, in addition to get information from the Arab armies that were being prepared. I had to do something that no one besides me could do. From all sides of this great war, the mission had reached the border of success or failure. A commission consisting of 11 countries in the United Nations had entered into negotiations about the fate of this piece of land. Canada, Czechoslovakia, the Netherlands, Peru, Guatemala, Sweden, and Uruguay were the majority group of these negotiations. They had proposed the plan to divide Palestine into two Jewish and Arab countries. For the Jews, this plan was the beginning of victory, even if it was not victory itself. After all, the Arabs were already here and had a country. But the Jews had nowhere. They were displaced, a nation scattered all over the world. Even half of the country was better than nothing. But the Palestinians were against it. For them, even losing 10% of their country meant failure. For this reason, the minority group of the negotiations, namely India, Yugoslavia, and Iran, proposed a single country plan and holding a referendum. Obviously, the Jews, after the illegal and forced migration that comprised 40% of the population in Palestine, would be the losers of the plan. That's why our lobbies did something to abort the minority group's plan. The majority group won the negotiation game and finally split Palestine through Resolution 181, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs.
Afghanistan, no. Argentina, abstention. India, no. Iran, no. Iraq, no. Lebanon, no. Ukraine, yes. South Africa, yes. Soviet Union, yes. The United Kingdom, abstain. The United States, yes. Uruguay, yes.
We have to turn our achievement from the paper to a reality on the ground. We are ready to do anything to win. This is where Golda Mabovich is now sitting, about to leave Jordan after meeting the king. In the house of a British legionary officer in Jordan, on a mission to convince Abdullah al-Hashemi not to accompany other Arab countries in the formation of the Salvation Army. Since a year ago, I gradually infiltrated the Jordanian army and sent all the information to the organization under the leadership of dear and caring Ben-Gurion. Now there is one step left to victory. The Haganah had issued a call for the Jewish youth between the ages of 17 and 25 to join the army. We will put these days behind. We have to think about the future and make plans for it. After this mission, we had to work harder to form a government. Those who accompanied the Jewish patriotism movement during the hard years now had to play their essential role in Israel and its administration. The conflict that started during the 1920 Nebi Musa riots would never end. The Jews had run out of patience. Now others had to pay for our 2,000 years of patience and silence. There was no difference between young and old, men and women, children and adults. There was no difference between military personnel and civilians. The Palestinians did not exist at all, so they could not return. History is written by the victors, and the world has to believe our big lie. They have to keep going further away and stay away from us. From now on, historians should write, there was no Palestinian Arab land before 1948, when the Jews became the absolute victors of the great game of the century. We deny everything. The Romans, Greeks, Herodotus, Babylonians, Iranians, and Ottomans have said nonsense by using such a name in their conversations, correspondence, and maps. How could they come back when they didn't exist here at all? The bigger the lie, the easier it is to believe. Those who decide to object what we say will face more and more bullets, like the people in Al Dawaima in the south of Al Khalil, where the lovely and hard-working Zionists were able to finally kill 455 Arabs, while 170 of them were women and children. Of course, they were not women. Their correct name is Shiksa, as mentioned in the Talmud, like the people in Balad al-Sheikh, a large number of whom worked in the Haifa oil refinery, and the soldiers of the Zionist movement managed to punish them both in the refinery and in their villages for insisting on their wrong and old claim on their lands. Like those 60 people in Safsaf village who were killed at the beginning of Hiram's awesome operation, like those killed in Ain al-Zaytun, like all the previous ones and all the upcoming ones, like all organized terror operations by Zionists throughout the world. What difference does it make how many Arabs, Muslims, and Christians are killed? We will cover the earth and even the seas from the Niles to the Euphrates in order to put an end to the homelessness of the Zionists. It's obvious that no one will worry about these numbers. The elderly will soon die, and the youth will forget everything almost as soon. After all, according to ancient Iranian doctors, the nature of soil is cold, and the dead and their survivors will soon forget the grief. Now is the time for Zionism to achieve victory at any cost. In the following years, Golda Meir became the first ambassador of Israel to the Soviet Union, the first Minister of Labor, and the second Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel. She was the female example of David Ben-Gurion and led the days full of violence and blood as the fourth Prime Minister of Israel. A woman who tried hard to deny and destroy Palestine as much as her 2,000-year-old anger, and died at the age of 80.